The Varnertown Indian people have been identified historically by many names, such as Somerville Indians, Etiwan Indians, Varner Indians, Wassamasaw Indians, etc. The tribe attained recognition in 2005 and has been serving on the Native American Advisory Committee for the Commission for Minority Affairs Office ever since. The Wassamasaw tribe and Varnertown Indian people have traced their lineage to 8 different bloodlines. The members of the Wassamasaw tribe of Varnertown Indians are all bloodline descendants of at least one of these native family lineages. These lineal bloodlines are as follows: Broad, Clark, Burbage, Varner, Dangerfield, Driggers, Huff, and Williams. The Wassamasaw tribe takes pride in our unique diversity. Our tribe is made up of Indigenous, European Indigenous, Afro Indigenous, and Asian Indigenous members. During colonial times, some Native Americans were captured by other tribes or slave-raiding parties to be sold as slaves on plantations. During the 1700s and 1800s, there are examples of plantation owners having children with their native slaves. Examples of our European Indigenous roots can be seen when examining the Varner, Dangerfield, and Broad bloodline progenitors. William Elliott Edings, a plantation owner, and a daughter with a native woman known as Indian Mary and Edisto Indian. That daughter, Hannah Edings, and her descendants would later join and marry into what would later be known as the Varnertown Indian community. George Broad was a German immigrant who owned a plantation in the late 1700s. George fell in love with an Indian slave named Daphne and had several children with her. Daphne and her descendants would later join and marry into what would later be known as the Varnertown Indian community. William Varner, a plantation owner, had many children with his native slave Rose. After his death, Rose and her children were eventually granted freedom. Her and her children are well documented within the community. Due to miscegenation laws, it was illegal for Native Americans and people of African bloodlines to marry outside the race. Because of these laws, many of these mixed-blood descendants who were considered mestizos or half-breeds married back into Native communities. This racism and prejudice lasted long into the 1900s. In 1961, in the midst of desegregation, the last reported lynching in our community occurred. Hamp Clark Jr., the son of Geneva Varner Clark, was a Native American of a very dark skin tone. He was killed in a bar because he was accompanied by his Native American wife who could pass for white. Examples of our Afro-Indigenous roots can be seen when examining some of the community members who married descendants of free African slaves during the time of miscegenation laws. An example of this can be seen when observing the Varner bloodline. Hannah Varner, Jane Varner, David Varner, and James Marion Varner married descendants of free African slaves. There are similar examples of these marriages in some of the other 7 tribal bloodlines. Another result of the miscegenation laws was the intermarrying of Native American families and marriages between tribes. For example, a Varner could marry a Williams, then their 2 children would marry a Clark and a Dangerfield, and then their grandchildren would marry a Broad, Huff, and Driggers. In the present day, many tribal members can trace themselves to most if not all tribal bloodlines. Not only did the tribal families and bloodlines intermarry, but kinship ties were formed with other tribes, mainly our sister tribes of the Edisto and Santee. It was not until the 1940s that the Wassamasaw tribe began gaining Asian Indigenous members. Many Filipino men became a part of the Navy. During World War II, the Navy base and shipyard provided jobs for the Varnertown men needing to make a living for their families. Although men of color were allowed in the Navy, racism still ran rampant. The Varnertown and Filipino men bonded over their shared struggle and similar backgrounds. This association introduced a number of Filipino men marrying into the Varnertown Indian community. Their children became the first generation of Asian Indigenous community members. The Wassamasaw tribe embraces our unique and diverse history and welcomes all our relations to become a part of the tribe and celebrate our shared history. As we note in our Constitution, the Wassamasaw tribe openly admits bloodline family members to its membership and does not discriminate on the basis of race or color. Our diverse native bloodlines that include Etiwan, Catawba, Cherokee, Edisto, Santee, and other settlement Indians, along with our Indigenous, European Indigenous, Afro-Indigenous, and Asian Indigenous members, makes the Wassamasaw tribe and Varnertown Indians particularly unique. when compared with other southeastern tribes. No matter who you are, if you are a part of our bloodline, we will always remain one community and one family.